Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, good. You?
Great. You're a little quiet. I just turned you up. Say something?
Hello.
Hmm. Perfect. Okay, how do I sound?
Fine. Yeah.
Okay, great. So let's see. Last time we talked about right, we talked about the mental APM and like step dodging stuff again and kind
Yeah.
of correcting that. So how has that felt um since correcting the practice regime?
I was doing the sort of drill thing for like 5 or 6 days after, but then I've just kind of started doing it, like focusing on it in lane for the first like 5 minutes, like
Oh,
really like
great.
hard focusing on it.
Uh-huh. And how has that?
Um,
What has that done for your games? Do you think?
it was awful at first.
Mm-hmm.
I was like feeding on really hard first, but
Yeah.
it seems to click now.
Nice. So you feel like you've seen an improvement and it's been like easier
Yeah.
to dodge stuff?
Yeah.
Awesome. That's what we like to hear. Okay. So today we said we wanted to talk about team fighting. Is that the case?
Yeah. Like, skirmishing, team fighting.
I'm
When it's
getting
not like
some. Where are you located? I'm getting some robot from you, so I'm thinking about changing the Discord region.
UK,
Okay, okay. Let's
so
try.
maybe
Yeah, let's try Europe. See how that goes. Okay. Say something again.
hello.
Yeah, much better. Okay,
Okay.
now I can hear you much better. So, right. So team fighting. So tell me a little bit about the problems you've been having with team fighting. What sorts of things are happening?
Um, so it's like when it's not like a clean front to back, just like you hit whatever's in front of you kind of fight. I
Mm.
kind of feel lost.
And so what happens, right? Like, do you get picked out? Do you do no damage, but and like your team loses the fight? Like, what happens?
It depends sometimes. Like, um, yeah. So if I'm like trying to like actually move in, then I'll just get one shot usually. Like or something will catch me,
Mm-hmm.
or otherwise I'm just kind of playing scared. I never actually joined the fight in the
Mm-hmm.
first place.
Gotcha. So, uh, have you tried anything so far to address these problems?
Just kind of making a bit of a checklist in my head of what I need to look out for in the fight.
Okay. And how has that gone when you've tried to do that?
Feels like it's just a lot to kind of keep track of.
Mm-hmm. Too much to keep track of.
Yeah,
Right.
like
So
kind of sort of make like a flow chart of what I'm going to do, if you know what I mean.
yeah,
But it's just like a
yeah.
too
So you
many.
you'll plan it out, and then and then the team fight starts, and it doesn't go like you'd planned, and
Yeah,
then and then
yeah,
it doesn't
pretty
work,
much.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So um, so it's important to recognize that team fighting isn't something that you do. It's something that yourself does. Do you know what I mean by that?
Not really.
So in the Inner Game of Tennis by W. Timothy Galway, he talks about that each of us has kind of two selves, right?
Yeah.
We've got the you, right, which is the one that's kind of in the driver's seat doing the thinking, right?
Hmm.
It's the one that has the internal dialogue. It's the one that makes decisions, right?
Yeah.
And then we've got yourself, which is the one that actually controls your body. It's the one that controls your automatic reactions. And amusingly enough, it's the one who you're talking to when you talk to yourself, right?
Okay.
If you
Yeah.
say, that was so bad, why did I do that? The I in that and the one that you're thinking about is yourself, right? It's
Yeah.
it's your body doing the reaction, right? So it's important to recognize that those two they're both part of you, but they're different, right? And
Okay.
team fighting is is like an activity that is done by the self, right? It's something that you do based on reactions, not really on planning, right? Which is why making a checklist didn't help so much.
Yeah.
And um and that's mostly to do with the fact that it happens in real time, right? Generally too quickly to process, right? Um it's kind of similar to like last hitting, right? Like you don't make a checklist and like plan what you're going to do to last hit. Like you either get the last hit or you don't, based on kind of what your body's going to do, right?
Yeah.
So I think the first and most important like advice that I can give about team fighting is that it really is a lot about practice, right? It's about, you know, not just knowing technically what you should do in a situation, but actually, you know, getting enough games that you are well familiarized with actually doing it,
Hmm.
right? So, you know, a lot of people will find that team fighting is something that does get uh, quite a lot better as they gain more experience just playing the game. But
Yeah.
definitely, there's a lot of stuff that we can talk about in terms of like, you know, what's going wrong and how can we try to work to improve it.
I
So
think part of the problem is as
yeah,
well, I used to play top. So now trying to play like when I started playing League, I played top, so I was playing like Scion and stuff. So now it's just like completely
yeah.
like the shifts like crazy.
So you're used to tank positioning, you're used to bruiser positioning, and now that you're on a squishy, you're like, holy crap, it's a totally different ball game, right?
Yeah.
You got to be in a totally different place and keep track of very different things, right? So, um, I'm gonna read you a little bit uh, from the curriculum that I've been writing that I think is relevant here. So, when we talk about team fighting here, really kind of what we're getting at, right, is positioning, right?
Yeah.
In a lot of cases, right? Because that's kind of and I mean, let's be real, League of Legends is like 80% positioning, right? But like, you know, that's kind of the core topic here, right? Is like how do we position in such a way that we can deal the damage that we need to deal to the people that we need to deal it to, while also not getting obliterated. So, um, it's a balance, right?
Yeah.
And that sounds like a cop out, but it's true, right? Like you have to balance aggression with caution. But the number one rule, right, is that safety has to come first, right? If you die, you do no damage,
Yeah.
right? And if we accept that we are not perfect predictors of the future, right, then like if we choose to do something that might get us killed, right, and then we do get killed, we no longer get the opportunity to make any other decisions, right? Where if we
Yeah.
stay alive, then even if we, you know, like lose the fight as a result of that, right? And, you know, you can even go so far as to say, like, maybe you lose the fight and, like, it's your fault, right? Like, you should have gone in, right? That's still a better outcome than having gone in, mispositioned, and dying. Because now you're alive and you can defend while the rest of your team is dead and, like, you know. So it's just, you know, pointing out at the beginning, right, that, like, in terms of performance, right, playing it too safe is a less bad negative outcome than playing it too aggressively, right? If you
Okay.
play it too aggressively, then you get punished really hard, right? And if you play it too safely, then you'll get punished just a little bit, right?
Okay.
So, on the other hand, if you're trying to play it perfectly, right? The extra feedback that you get from the game, that being that you get obliterated and die, can be
Yeah.
kind of helpful for you figuring out what the limits actually are of what you're capable of, right? So, you know, this is an issue in all of League of Legends, not just team fighting. You know, it has to do with laning, it has to do with, I mean, like basically any position you can be in, right? But generally, the more aggressively you play it, you know, that's gonna help you kind of figure out where the limits are.
Yeah.
But in doing that, right, you will, you know, once you hit a limit and get killed, right, it can be difficult to play for the rest of the game because you get put really far behind, right? So this is a problem, right? Especially when you know, you might be playing primarily ranked, right? And so the question becomes like, you know, okay, like should I play, you know, if I'm unsure, should I play aggressively or should I play more passively, right? You know,
Yeah.
it's hard to know, you know, right? Like if you
It's
care
like, do you
about your
want to?
immediate performance,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's like you play more passively, but if you care more about learning, then generally you're going to have to play more aggressively, and that might actually lead to you losing the game, right?
Yeah.
And that can feel really bad, but it's really important to remember that the excuse me, I'm getting a call. Oh, okay. Emergency alert. COVID announcement. Anyway,
Okay.
so where was I?
Playing more aggressive, you got to
Right.
int a bit to learn.
Yeah, you got to int a bit to learn. Exactly. And so it can be helpful, especially when you're trying to do that, to do it in a space that is more forgiving, right?
Yeah.
So if you have enough friends to get together in houses, those are a really awesome way to practice positioning more aggressively in fights. Because if you die, who cares, right? Like it's a game between friends, and you know nobody's gonna yell at you, right?
Yeah. In this game, I think we were 5 stacked. I think it was flex or
Nice.
yeah, it might have been even a normal or something, but it was yeah, it was like 5 stacked.
Yeah. So whatever you can do to make yourself comfortable taking risks that might not pay out in the short-term scope of like, are you going to win this game? Those are going to be things that are important to do if you're going to want to get any serious repetition, any serious practice in on positioning more aggressively and figuring out what you can do and what you can't, right?
Okay.
But at the heart of it, right, every champion has like a certain range of influence, right? And inside of that range, they pose a significant threat, right? And you can kind of think of that threat range kind of like the event horizon of like the gravity well around like a black hole, right?
Okay.
Like if something gets a little bit too close, it's going to get sucked in, and then you can't escape, right? So generally, the way that you're going to want to try to balance aggression and safety is by getting as close to that event horizon as you can without entering it, right?
Okay.
And as your skill as a player increases, you'll be able to get closer and closer and closer while still actually being safe, right? But until you can be close and safe, you have to settle for far and safe, because close and dead is not a great option, right?
Okay.
So that said, like, you know, to continue this kind of astrophysics metaphor, champions aren't the only sources of gravity, right? Minions and towers also can do damage and pose significant threats, especially in the early game, right? And so when an opponent walks into range of your minions and damages you, your minions attack them in response. Same is true of towers, right? And this, along with several other things like the shape of the map, the position of the fountain, give the defending player a terrain-based advantage in fights. Right?
Yeah.
I think we've talked about that before, right? Like the idea of defender's advantage, right? So this is why we can have laning phases that aren't just the stronger champion killing the weaker one over and over. Yeah? Question?
Yeah, can you just explain exactly what you mean by that? Because I think we did, but I'm not sure.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Like,
so let's go into that, because that's a really important idea. So I'll share screen and pull up a whiteboard so we can kind of talk about it.
We talked about it in the sense that, like, if you've got more area to dodge, then it's easier to dodge.
Yes.
But I'm guessing there's more to it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, or actually, is this the best way to do it? No, it's not. I'm going to do, instead, I'm I'm going to pull over Rift Kit, because that's actually a map. That's the best way to talk about positioning. So, okay. So, you know, here we have our nice little gravity wells around our champions. Great. So defender's advantage. What makes it tick, right? So the first and most important aspect of defender's advantage is what I already talked about, which is the notion of minions, right?
Yep.
So, you know, the difference between this fight, and this fight is pretty obvious, right?
Yeah.
You know, the difference is the amount of minion damage that one person is going to take or not, right? And so the further back you are, like the closer to your minion line you are, right, the more difficult it is for the opponent to find a position that they can attack you from where they don't take minion damage in return, right? Mm-hmm. If instead you walk up, the enemy gets the same advantage, right? You're going to take minion damage, they're not going to take minion damage, right? And this is like the primary reason why we are able to have laning phases in League of Legends where it isn't just the stronger champion killing the weaker one over and over, right?
Yeah.
Going aggressive, positioning aggressive so that you can be in range to deal damage at all has a cost, and that cost is health, right? So one of the best strategies you can employ is to use this defender's advantage to protect yourself while you gain resources, right? If you aren't strong enough to walk forward, take minion damage and damage from them, and still do more damage to them than you take, right? Then generally you're going to need to get stronger, right? So you use this defender's advantage to protect yourself while you farm and get stronger. And then once you are stronger, that's what then allows you to overcome the enemy's defender's advantage and go aggressive, right?
Okay.
So identifying the relative strength of you and them, and also what kind of advantages, the terrain, I'll say, not just the map, but also the minions and the turrets that are on the map that actually do damage, right? Identifying the terrain advantage for both sides and the relative strength of the two champions is like one of the core skills of League of Legends, right? Knowing when you can overcome the enemy's defender's advantage and actually go aggressive successfully is like the game. Like, okay. That's what everyone's trying to figure out, right? That's the core question that the game poses, right? Is when can you go aggressive? So, the other notion of defender's advantage has to do with movement and skill shots, right? So, if you are, an AD carry and you're positioning in lane, right? And let's say you're Ezreal and the enemy support is like Karma or something, right? So if Karma walks towards you and you're walking away from Karma, and the two of you fire skill shots at each other, right? Whose is easier to land?
Just in a open lane,
yeah.
no minions or anything.
Yeah, nothing going on. Let's say you're like, totally like center of the lane, it's like level 1, and you're like, I don't know, jacking off in bottom lane for whatever reason, right? She's moving in, you're moving away, right? Who has the easier time landing the skill shot?
I do.
Yeah. Why is that?
Because she's moving into my range.
Yeah. So if you fire a skill shot, right? Let's say you fire it from this position, right?
Yeah.
Then time is going to happen, and movement is going to happen, right? You're going to go like to here, and she's going to go from here to here, right? So if you fire it, right, this is the distance your skill shot needs to cover before it starts to hit her hitbox.
Right? Yeah, she's running like into it.
Yeah, she's running into it, exactly, right? Where if you think of it from her position, right, if she fires her skill shot from here, right, then by the time it's actually able to get to you, it has to travel a much larger distance because the distance is increasing as time goes on because you're moving away from where you were when she fired the skill shot, right?
Yeah.
So just literally, right, like this distance is much shorter than this distance, even though the relative distance between the two champions remains the same over time, right? So moving into the enemy means that your skill shots have a longer distance and their skill sets have a shorter distance that they have to cover, right? Which means it's harder to dodge when you're chasing, it's harder to, and it's easier to hit stuff when you're running away. So, again, that makes running away really good, right? You know, but you can't run away and hit them unless they're chasing you, right? So they have to go aggressive for you to get this advantage, right? It's like a punishment of the aggression that they can take, right? So, so that's another part of Defender's advantage. When we think about the map, right, you know, when we zoom out even further, right, like, you know, if this is kind of like the line of, like, territory, right, like they've taken your outers and they're sieging your inners, right,
Yeah.
you have this distance between the like territory on which fights are occurring and your base, right, and they have this distance, so it's easier for you to go back and heal and shop and in general be higher health, higher mana, and with more of your gold spent than it is for them, right? So on average, that'll confer an advantage, right? In terms of vision, right? You know, inside of your territory, you get vision control from your towers, right? They help you keep track of, like, what's going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you'll generally have better information when you're fighting in your territory, right? And in the laning phase, when everything's still up, if you're fighting kind of on your side of the lane, you know, it's probably, you know, you can make a safe bet that your jungler is closer by than theirs would be, right? Assuming that both of them are roughly the same distance away, right? You know, it's easier for your jungle to join if it's on your side of the thing. So, like, you know, there's many ways in which this manifests, right? And but the core idea is that in basically every situation, the defender has an advantage.
Okay.
So a lot of positioning, right, is figuring out whether you're supposed to be the defender or the aggressor, right? And if you're the defender, then you get that advantage, right? You become stronger, but you no longer get you no longer have something very important, and that's choice, right? If you have to retreat, then you don't get to choose where the fight happens. You don't get to choose when the fight happens, right? That's up to the aggressor, right? But you get the advantage of having the terrain on your side, essentially. So, especially in team fighting, right? Figuring out whether you're supposed to be kiting back or moving forward, I think is really, really big, right? And that'll probably be one of the first things that we take a look at when we start looking at some clips, is like identifying which direction you're supposed to be moving, right?
Okay.
And which direction they're supposed to be moving. To return to the gravity metaphor, right? So the strength of a gravity well, right, of a given target is it kind of corresponds to, like, how powerful they are in terms of the stats, right? So, like, you know, a support is going to be a weaker gravity well than a 13-0 mid laner, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about getting spaghettified by an asteroid, right? But the nice thing about that is that you can think of yourself as a gravity well as well, right? And so a weak opponent is no longer a threat. They're a resource to be consumed. They are the asteroid and you are the black hole, right? And every object that you suck in makes you bigger and stronger and increases the strength of your gravity, right? And if you become the strongest pull on the map, there's no threats. Winning becomes trivially easy. You just walk into the enemy, obliterate them, and move on towards the nexus, right? So your goal in positioning is to be in a spot that allows you to remain alive while consuming the maximum number of resources possible, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, aside from actual to the death fights, that's kind of the rule, right? Is be in the position that gets you the most resources while not dying. And that's kind of the second major challenge of positioning, you know. Once you've decided it's not time to fight because you don't have the advantage and you can't go aggressive and they're not going aggressive, right? And you're kind of in a stable position, right? How do you position within that stable position to get resources? That's the question, right? So, notably as well, we can think of positioning in a bunch of different scopes, right? You can think of the position like relative to your teammates. You know, are you behind or in front of them, right? You can think of your position on your screen, right? In terms of like the immediate terrain and like where the minions are and like where the enemy champions are, right? And you can think of your position on the map, right? Or you think of like whole areas as kind of single locations and like what objectives am I near to, you know, that kind of thing, right? So each of these scopes, right, formation, like screen positioning and map positioning, are going to follow the same kind of basic principles, right? These ideas of defender's advantage and gravity and territory and things like this. But the difficult thing is that a different position could be correct for different scopes, right? Like, the map might want you to be in one area, but then the screen might want you to be in some other area, and then, like, to be with your team, you would actually want to be in a third area, right? So...
Okay, so like if I'm weak but my team's strong, then
yes.
I need to be with my team, but...
Yeah, they want to go aggressive, but you want to play with defender's advantage. How do you do that? Right?
Yeah.
You should be collecting resources, they should be fighting. How do you manage that? It's not simple, right? You've got multiple scopes that you're thinking in, and you have to balance the trade-offs of each, right? And that's kind of the third major challenge in positioning, is figuring out which scope is the most important right now, right? Because you can only ever position in one spot, right?
All right.
So, yeah. So having laid this out, right? These are I think the problems that we have, right? And so now let's like talk about solutions, right? So I'm gonna write each of these problems down. When do I position aggressively versus defensively? Right? That's the first question. The second question is, when positioning in a stable scenario, how do I get the most resources I can? That's the next question. And then finally, how do I navigate positioning in multiple scopes? These are the questions. So the first thing that I want to talk about is something that I think we've already talked a little bit about, and that's the idea of tethering, right? Have we talked about this before?
Yeah.
So what's your understanding of tethering?
Keeping something or someone at the max range where I can still deal damage to it.
Yeah,
or
so if
having
you're...
influence over them, I guess.
Yeah, if you're a longer range, then tethering is very easy. So the what is it? So it's like you have, you know, if you have a longer range, then it's exactly that, right? Like you want to keep them inside of your range, but you want to stay outside of their range.
Yeah.
Right? So what is tethering when you have similar or shorter range? How does that look?
I guess just sort of... It's hard to explain. Is it like sort of like punishing them when you're safe to do it?
Sure. What do you mean by that? Define
So
when
like,
it's safe to do it.
so if they're doing something else, so like if like in lane, if they're hitting a minion, you can walk up and out of them.
So what do we call that? What do we call that idea?
Trading.
Yeah, trading stance.
Right,
Is the notion where you're trying to punish them for the animation of last hitting, right? Hit them when they're weak. So the larger version of that, the more general version of that, is cooldown abuse, right?
Yeah.
It's just the idea that if they're on cooldown, they're temporarily weaker, right? They don't have access to one of the things that they need to deal damage, and so For that moment, they are a weaker champion. Their gravity is less strong. And so, if that change in gravity has suddenly pushed you to the point where you are stronger, right? That is one of the times during which your positioning should change. When they're on cooldown, you become and that makes you stronger. That is the moment that you should go aggressive, right? So to come back to this first question, when do I position aggressively versus defensively? If them being on cooldown flips who's stronger, that generally is time to change your positioning, right? And that's a very general thought, but it's a kind of a powerful thought, because it also works in the reverse, right? If you are on cooldown and you are temporarily weaker, then they are temporarily stronger than you, perhaps. And even if you're the winning lane or something, it might still be correct for you to back away, because you're not stronger right now, right?
Okay.
It's about momentary strength. That's what it's all about. So when we talk about tethering from the same or shorter range, generally here's kind of how we'll think of it, right? So it goes back to this idea of gravity, right? So if this is the event horizon right here, right? You want to get as close to it as you can without crossing it, right? And what that does for you is, if they use an ability and suddenly go on cooldown, you are close enough to go aggressive and punish it.
Yeah.
If you're too far away, right, then, you know, to the original metaphor that I give is it's like the Goldilocks zone of, like, you know, where can life live relative to like a heat source, like a star, you know? And it's like, if you're too close to the sun, then your planet is too hot and you burn up. And if you're too far away, it's too cold and you'd freeze to death, right? So you need to be in that zone where you're close enough to punish, but far enough away that you aren't getting hit. And so right at the edge of their range is, like, generally always the correct place to be, whether you have longer range than them or shorter range than them. If you have longer range than them, great, you can actually attack them from that position. If you don't have longer range than them, you still position there, right at the edge of their range, and you just wait for them to become weaker than you, because they've used an ability or because the terrain is bad for them. And that then becomes your moment.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
How are you feeling about all of this?
It all makes sense. It's just like stuff you don't think about, I guess, unless.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like things I wouldn't have normally just naturally came in the conclusion.
Okay, good. So new ideas, but they're making sense. That's what we like to hear.
Yeah.
So let's see. So when we talk about team fighting, right, it's pretty much the same as laning. It's just there are a bunch of planets all doing wonky-ass orbits around each other in complicated patterns, right? So there's a bunch of gravity, right? And it's very, very easy, as you have found out, to get sucked in, right? Yeah. If you get five black holes that all, converge on you at once, right? You immediately get spaghettified. And it is extremely painful. So we don't want that to happen, right? So what do, right? Well, I mean, if you just kind of take a look at this and you blur your eyes, right? What do we kind of see? I mean, it's just kind of one big range, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right? There's your new event horizon.
Okay.
It's just the sum of all of the event horizons of the whole enemy team. Right? Yeah. And so you want to be, somewhere in this area, right? Close enough, but not so close that you can get hit. Right?
Okay.
And if and when they use their abilities, right? That is what gives you the permission to go in, right? Instead of thinking of it like, I have to do damage, how do I position safely to do it? Think of it instead as, I have to position safely. Now, within that safety, what's the most amount of damage I can deal? If you flip that around like that, suddenly it will become a lot more clear. right? Because there can be whole situations. If you watch pro streams, you'll see this all the time. There will be positions where their team will take a fight, and the AD carry just kind of sits there, and they're just like, guys, this doesn't work. Like, I can't go forward without getting one shot. And they just sit there. And like a good 3-4 seconds of the team fight happen, and then everybody on the enemy team is on cooldown, and then they go in, right?
Yeah.
And it's at that point that they can walk into range of the gravity well, but because everybody's gravity is so weak, because they're all on cooldown, they can still remain safe and then use their gravity to deal a bunch of damage, right? Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, I see Reckless doing this like all the time.
Yeah.
And my friends are always like, "Oh man, what's he doing?" He's like,
yeah, he's like in the middle of 4 people, but they're all on cooldown. It doesn't matter, right? What are they
no,
gonna
like,
do? Want to attack him to death?
He's just standing still, like doing
Yeah.
nothing. My friends are like, what's he doing?" He's like
Yeah.
baiting his team, but like I'm
Yeah,
thinking that they're looking like there must be something that I'm not seeing,
and that's what it is. He's waiting. That's the key difference, right? This is another point that I think is really important in life, not as well as League, right? Is this notion of the difference between doing nothing and waiting.
Yeah.
Right. So, have I talked about that before? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I think I get the idea.
How would you explain it then? What's the difference?
So waiting is like you're watching for the opportunity to do something.
Exactly.
And
doing nothing is just motionlessness.
Yeah.
Waiting is motionlessness with purpose. Motionlessness that's primed to spring into action as long as the right conditions occur. And if they don't occur, nothing happens.
You never go.
Remain motionless. And that's fine, right? Your teammates will flame you. 100% it will happen. You will position correctly, they will position incorrectly, they'll go too deep into a fight that you can't join because you will get killed, they will die, you will have made the right choice not to go in, and then they will flame you. Be prepared for that.
Yeah.
That will happen. But, every time it does happen, it is your responsibility to go back, watch the VOD, and ask yourself, did I make the right call? Right?
Yeah.
Watch it in slow motion. Were there cooldowns that got used that you didn't see? Were the enemy champions actually weaker than you thought that they were? Right? Could you have taken more damage and dealt more damage and survived? Right? That's the question that you're always trying to answer. Is you don't actually know how weak or strong the gravity is. Right? The game doesn't give you a number for that. That's a calculation that you have to do yourself. And that's basically what damage and movement foresight is, right? Is your ability to do that calculation, to predict the outcome given certain inputs to the game, right? League of Legends is just a giant calculator, and you're trying to predict what the eventual answer is going to be, given your inputs, right? So, as you gain more experience, as you try more things, as you go aggressive and die like an idiot, you learn more stuff, right? You understand the calculation being made better. And that's essentially the idea. So, yeah.
Okay.
So, I realize that that's not exactly the most, like, precise, helpful answer, but, like, you've hit upon one of the major, like, things that makes League of Legends difficult and also fun, right? Like, this is one of the central problems of the game.
Yeah.
So, although there isn't a simple answer, I hope you enjoy figuring out what you can about it, because that's kind of, like I say, I think that's where the fun is, you know? Like, when you play a team fight perfectly, and you dodge everything by a millimeter, and, like, you know, you leave it with 1 health, having pentakilled the enemy team, right? Like, that's the high moment. That's what we all chase.
Yeah.
Right? So, you know, I don't really have an end to that.
No, I get it.
You get the idea. So, okay. So when do I position aggressively defensively? Generally, you position, and this is where it comes back to being, like, stupidly simple, but, like, also very true, right? When you are stronger than them, you position aggressively. When you are weaker than them, you position defensively.
Yeah.
Like, duh, but also, okay, that's it, right? Like, now your question is, the real question, which is, how do I know when I'm weaker and when I'm stronger? And that is really the question, right? Answering that question is actually where the difficulty lies, right? Positioning is easy. Having the data that tells you where to position is hard.
Okay.
So that's the real question. That's what you really have to figure out, is how to know when you're stronger and how to know when you're weaker.
Yeah.
Because if you have that, then it's easy. So when positioning in a stable scenario, how do you get the most resources that you can, right? Guess what? This one's second first, same as the first, right? If you are strong enough to be in range to collect resources, then do it. If you attempting to collect resources results in your death, or, you know, a position where you get put close to death, you know, you take too much damage and have to go base or something, right? Then that's bad.
Yeah.
You know? Do what works, don't do what doesn't work. Five head. Like, it's so dumb, but like that's what it is, right?
Yeah.
But this one is more interesting. How do I navigate positioning in multiple scopes, right? So this one is a little bit tougher and a little bit more complicated to answer. So I think an amazing example of this kind of thing is like early game positioning in lane, right? So let's say, for instance, that you are like Cape Karma or some other degenerate long-ass range nonsense lane. Maybe Varus Karma is a little bit more in meta right now, right? But like,
yeah.
So you're Varus Karma and you're against, like, I don't know, Ezreal Thresh or something, you know? Like a lane with absolutely no wave clear whatsoever, right?
Okay.
In a 2v2, right, in this contrived example, the correct thing for you to do is to shove them under their tower mercilessly and poke them to death, right?
Yeah.
If it's literally no one else is on the map, that is the best move by far, right? So your correct positioning for a 2v2 lane is here.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
So what's the immediate problem with this? This looks stupid, right? So what's the issue?
Junglers.
Yeah, junglers exist. Darn! How dare they? How dare they ruin my perfect 2v2 lane phase, right? So this is the problem of multiple scopes, right? Is that the enemy jungler is like gonna come like this and he's gonna kill you, and that sucks, right? So the correct position for the map scope is more like here, right?
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that? Right? This is a difficult question. So generally, so okay, so yeah, you have an idea
on how much information you've got.
Ah, that's a good answer. What do you mean by
So,
that? Explain that.
If you don't know where the jungler is, he's bot.
True. Did I teach you that? That's good.
Saber did.
Good. Saber's smart. So that's exactly the way you ought to think about it, right? If you don't know where the enemy jungler is, he is literally in the bush.
Yeah.
That's just how it is, right? So you just have to think of it that way, right? And once you obtain information that says that is not true, then suddenly this scope allows you to be anywhere. The map scope is fine with any of these, right? And then you can optimize for the riskier, more correct positioning for your 2v2 lane, right?
Yeah.
So generally, here's the rule. Whichever, it's like, you have to take of all of the scopes, if you're playing to perform, again, with that in mind, right? You want to position at the most aggressive spot that is safe in all scopes.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense, yeah.
Right? So if there's any scope that prevents you from being in a certain place, then you have to obey that. Because if you don't, then that scope punishes you and you get killed. But in, you know, any if all else is equal and all positions are safe, then you take the most aggressive one, the one that gives you the best resources, the one that denies the most resources to the enemy team,
Yeah.
the one that gets you towers, whichever it ends up being, right? And just like the other ones, right? That's like fundamentally true, but also not very helpful. Right? Because now the question becomes, what are all the scopes, and where are they telling me to be? Right? And that's, again, that's the real question, right? Is how do I know what's safe in all scopes? Right? And that is the subject of much debate and study. That's the question. So where does this leave us? You tell me. Having thought about it in this way, what are you thinking about how you're going to try to get better at positioning?
In terms of the different scopes.
In terms of the different scopes, in terms of aggression and defensiveness, in terms of all of this stuff we've been talking about, where does this leave us? What are the conclusions you've drawn from what we've said?
I mean, before a fight or any kind of like engagement, kind of map out how strong everybody is.
Yeah. And how do you do
And
that?
items, and just kind of knowing what the champs do.
Yeah. The sources of strength are kits, items, and levels.
Yeah. And levels, yeah.
Yeah. Levels are really important.
Yeah,
A lot of people don't think about those past the laning phase, but like a level 10 champion to a level 11 champion is a pretty darn big difference. You know? It's harder to feel than 5 to 6, because it's not quite so clear, but the numbers are big, dude. They're huge.
Yeah.
So, keeping track of XP differences is a big, big deal. So, pressing tab when fights are gonna start happening soonish, you know, and making sure that you keep yourself informed on who's strong and who's not is critical information. That is a huge part of learning where you can position, where you can't. If you don't know how strong people are, you have to assume that they're giga strong. You have to assume that if you enter the gravity well, you will die. But that is not always the case. And that is one of the places that you can optimize to get more aggression done. To do more for your team, deal more damage, while still living. This, of course, also doesn't take into account fights where it can be correct to position in a way that you do die, but you deal so much more damage that your team wins the fight harder for you having done it, right? And that's a weird exception to get into, right? Like, you know, but the way to think about that is that really, you know, however you want to think about it, a team composition is just a giant champion with 5 moving parts, or you can think of a champion as just a team composition of 1. Whichever way is more convenient to think about it, right? But like, you know, it's a giant ball of damage and durability and mobility and CC and stuff, right?
Yeah.
And one team is trying to take the enemy team's nexus, and the other team is trying to take your team's nexus, right? And so it's like, you can think of the team as a whole unit, and it's like, if it's correct for your team for you to sacrifice yourself as a game piece,
is it worth me taking the death?
Like, yeah, what does your team get is the thing that actually matters, not what do you get, right? And in solo queue, that gets kind of warped because you can't always trust your team to do what they need to do, right?
Yeah.
And so you might weight yourself a little bit more than the rest of your teammates because you actually have control over what you do, as opposed to variability that is solo queue teammates. So, you know, that gets even more difficult when you have to adjust your expectations of teammates based on what they've done in the game so far. Like, it, you know, every single question you can ask in this area is just a giant rabbit hole. That's the moral of the story here. Right? Is that there are a ton of things to optimize here. But, as I've already said, that's the game. That's what's fun. So, but yeah, I think that's a really great start. Keeping track of who's strong and who's weak, and perhaps even who's stronger and who's weaker, and by what amount, is probably what you need to start thinking about, right? Because generally, I think what you'll find is, for the most part, if you are, like, aware of who's stronger and weaker and by what amounts, you actually probably already know most of what you need to about positioning, right? Like
Okay.
the resultant position that you take is generally pretty easy to understand once someone points out to you the factors involved, right? The
Yeah.
formula is not that complicated, but figuring out all of the variables that go into the formula is very complicated, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. Yeah. I think the other thing as well was like the mindset that you talked about, like I don't have to go in and do as much damage and try and live.
No.
It's like I have to live and then try and deal damage.
Yes. If you approach it from that angle, you will find much more success.
Okay.
And that's this kind of like I've called it in the past like backhanded aggression, right? And like that's really where the money is in League of Legends. If you can learn to do that kind of backhanded aggression, where you're using defender's advantage, but in a weird way where you're actually like positioning, you're like getting to the objective first, and then going a little past it so that to come contest the objective they have to walk into you, and you like get defender's advantage while going. It's like stupid. Like you're so broken when you do that, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of stuff that you can do.
I don't know if this is like what you mean, but I can't remember. I heard someone say like you don't necessarily need like engage if you've got really good vision control.
Yeah, that's
'Cause
exactly it.
Like walk into you.
Yeah. I mean, because think about what makes that true, right? It's like if you're a team that's going to take Baron, right? And you've destroyed all of the vision in the river and in the pit, right?
Yeah.
The enemy team has a dark map, and they know that Baron's up, right? Their only choices are face check you or give you Baron.
Yeah.
And both of those suck. Hardcore. Both of those probably result in them getting, their whole base taken, right? So then you know, through the threat of you taking Baron, you force them to face check you, and in that way, exactly, you force them to engage on you, right?
Yeah.
If they can defend you, even if you have Baron, that threat is meaningless. You can take Baron as many times as you want, and they'll wave clear it the whole time, and you can't win, right?
Yeah.
So there are definitely positions where if you don't have engage, you're doomed, right? If the enemy is good enough at defending, but most compositions can't defend full Baron team.
Yeah.
It's just the way that it is, right? So, not to mention that, if you have full vision control and you're stronger, then you can deny them resources through mid and late game freezing, like LS always talks about, things of that sort.
Yeah.
Once you get into more coordinated games, but like, let's be real, solo queue in this year is not going to have that. So,
I don't know. I feel like in solo queue, every time I try to freeze, like someone just goes off and dies.
Yep.
So it's just
Every time.
it's not worth. Like,
Yep. Yep. What is the correct position? In the scope of playing League of Legends correctly, it's freezing. In the scope of holy shit, I'm playing solo queue, it's go join your team.
Yeah.
Because they're gonna die. Haha. XD scopes, by the way. Big kick. Okay. So, with these notions in mind, right, that we need to keep track of who's stronger and who's weaker, and by how much. And the idea of positioning in the most aggressive spot that's safe in all scopes, right? Let's watch your VOD that you uploaded with these in mind. So let me go grab that.
Do you mind if I go AFK for like 30 seconds while you do that?
Not at all. Go for it.
Okay.
if there's anybody in chat. How you doing? Good to see you. Thanks for stopping by.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So, do you have any of the team fights bookmarked in this one? Any idea when they happen?
Oh, I was going to ask, can we take like a quick look at lane just to make sure I'm
Oh,
like
sure, absolutely.
crazy?
I mean, there's of course going to be tons of stuff we can talk about all over the game, but yeah. So let's just watch this, right, and kind of think about your positioning and look at the results of stuff and try and see how that could be predicted based on these models, right?
Okay.
I'm gonna monk ass a little bit watching that. God. Okay.
No, I forgot the bookmark them. I'll make a note to do that for next time.
Sure.
The info to me.
I don't think I ever asked you to, so I'm not surprised. So look at this. So already a mistake was made this lane. I won't say by who.
Okay.
What do you think it was?
Thresh playing so far back.
So far back? Oh, I thought he went way too aggressively. I mean, look at this.
Okay.
Right? In this position,
okay.
Right?
Yeah, sorry. I thought
Ezreal is supposed to be able to destroy him, right? It's 1v2. He's going to take 2 minions worth of aggro, right? They're going to take 0 minion damage in reverse, and you're not in range to punish them.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So this is this notion of tethering, right? And it's like, as a lane, when there's 2 people, right? I'm sure you've heard the idea of like parallel positioning in lane, right? Like you want to be, parallel, and when they walk up, you walk up, and when they walk back, you walk back, right? So it's debatable whose fault it is that the 2 of you are out of position and for each other in your formation, right? But Thresh has made the call that despite being out of formation with you, the terrain and the matchup make it good enough that he thinks he can overcome the defender's advantage and he can get something aggressively done, right? That's the call that he's making. I won't say whether it's right or wrong, but I'm just saying, like, that's how you can think about it, right? Yeah. And because Ezreal fires no auto attacks or Qs back in his direction, it ends up working out. Nice. I liked that auto. I thought that auto was hot. Let's watch that again. I don't think we would have seen that the last time that I watched a VOD of yours. That was nice. Dude, this is... you might think that I'm just being amusing, but, like, that's like a max range auto that you did, auto-canceled perfectly, and walked away from, keeping your cursor relatively close to your champion. I think that's big improvement. The result doesn't look that impressive, but I can appreciate the character control there. That's really good. I mean, we've seen you play into Ezreal lanes as the weaker champion and gotten absolutely destroyed in the first couple of waves, right? And here, granted, this particular Ezreal and Yuumi aren't going very aggressive, and they aren't kind of pressing the advantage that they might have. But still, regardless of that, I like where you're positioning. And you did a good job punishing them for walking up without doing anything. Nice. Look at that! I think last time you would have gotten hit by that.
Yeah, I think I remember in game thinking, like,
yeah,
I'm surprised I managed to get that.
Uh-huh. Yeah. No, already, like, I'm seeing your clicks, you're clicking a lot faster, your mouse control is better. Like, this looks like a completely different player. So good job on the practice. I think this time it worked. Very, very nice.
I think it fades as the game goes on.
Oh, sure, absolutely. I mean, that's
Okay. All right,
how
okay.
that's how it's going to be until you keep practicing and get it even better, you know? Like, you know, whether it happens with minimal effort on your part or completely automatically is the difference between it lasting the whole game and lasting until you stop thinking about it.
Okay.
Right? And that is just a matter of familiarity, right? Like right now, what you have is in the adult learning model, which stage are you at right now?
Conscious competence.
Yes. And how do you move from conscious competence to unconscious competence?
I can't remember.
Practice.
Okay.
Not study, but practice. It's
Yeah.
just about repetition at this point.
Okay.
And the point is that it has to become more and more and more familiar, right? You have however many years of muscle memory of playing slow inside you, right?
Yeah.
And you have to unlearn that muscle memory and replace it with this muscle memory, right? And when this muscle memory becomes stronger because you've repeated it more times, right? It's not exactly like that, right? Like you don't have to repeat it as many times as you repeated the other thing, but you know, it's non-linear. Point is, the more times you repeat the correct thing and the fewer times you repeat the thing that you're trying not to do, right? The more used to doing it the right way you're going to get, and the more familiar it will become. And when it becomes more familiar than what you currently do, then it'll switch over. And you'll do it without thinking, and in fact, again, you'll get to a point where not doing it will be effortful.
Okay.
To play slow will require you to concentrate.
Okay. Yeah.
But it's an ongoing process. And every time, every game that you focus on it.
Oh, this was. I remember this. This was really doomed. This was just such a waste.
Okay, so let's think about what happened there in terms of the positioning frameworks we talked about today. How would you explain what we just saw in terms of those models? What went wrong?
It's too far away to do anything.
So what's that a problem with? Which problem were you struggling with?
I'm not sure. I just didn't move to the fight in time.
So perhaps you did not recognize that you were stronger fast enough?
I think I didn't realize it was going on. Honestly.
So again,
maybe,
it becomes a problem of awareness, right? Keeping track of who's stronger and weaker and by how much, right? So you eventually realized that you had a stronger position, something that you could force a good play in, but you realized it late enough that the opportunity had passed by the time you arrived.
Yeah.
So if you had been paying more attention, if you had more information, if you were keeping better track of who's stronger and who's weaker and by how much at every moment, this might have been doable.
Okay.
Right? So it's about awareness, but it's also about the speed of awareness, right?
Yeah.
Whether you get the answer and how fast you get the answer are separate problems.
Okay.
You know, rotating up into the river at level 3 to get a kill on the enemy jungler and take double buffs is a fantastic play. You know? So this is not a problem of like this is a wrong thing to attempt, right? It's a problem of that your understanding of what would happen if you walked into the river was flawed.
Okay.
Right? You thought you would get there faster, or you thought that they would hang around longer, or something of that sort. Right? It's hard to say exactly what.
Yeah.
But that's what you need to focus on, and that's what you need to figure out. Right? So, like, you know, when you're, like, reviewing your own games, right? These are the moments that you have to focus on, right? Because, like, if you look at this, right, you know, like, let's say, so here's the moment that they show up. You actually see it on the map pretty much immediately and start going pretty much immediately, right? But by the time you arrive, they're already out. Now, this is a total. I can see your cursor. I can see you clicking here, right? And I can see your ward on cooldown. That is the information that you needed to know that this wouldn't work. Isn't that sad? Yeah. Isn't that absolutely tragic? To be denied a kill because of using a ward in a place that's reasonable to place a ward. Right? So then, if you want to go crazy, you can go back and you say, okay, where did I use that ward? And was there a way that I could have avoided using that ward that still would have been safe? Right? And if we look at like this, right? Like, is there any world, is there any universe in which...
I could have just asked Thresh to ward that.
Sure. Yeah, so you can ask Thresh to ward that. Is there a world in which you don't have to ward? Do you know where the enemy jungler is?
No.
Right. So now you can ask the question, how do I know where the enemy jungler is at level 1? Right? And now you can get into jungle tracking. Like, there's, you know, everything's a rabbit hole. I will say that a million times because it's very true, right? But, like, you know. So, if we assume that there is no way that you can know where the enemy jungler is at level 1, and that this ward is necessary to keep you safe in lane, which are both contestable claims, right? Then we have to conclude that that play that you went to in the river can't work. There's no way it can happen.
Yeah.
And so you have to then be able to look at the fact that your ward is on cooldown, look at the fact that this fight is going to happen, you know, that this fight is what it is, and be able to say, like, when should you call it off? Because clearly you went too far, right?
Yeah.
There is a world in which the enemy makes the choice to fight there. You know, they fight over the scuttle crab. And in that case, you going is a really important thing, right? So let me see if I can find the exact moment. I think it's actually even further back, right? It's like level 3, right?
Yeah. Just got level 3, yeah.
Yeah, here we go. So at this point, right, like maybe walking up here is correct, right? But maybe
I should turn back.
Here.
Like kind of like now. Yeah.
Yeah. This is the moment I think that you have to make the choice to turn away. Both of them are facing this direction, and that's not a direction that makes sense to face if he's going to keep doing the scuttle.
Yeah.
Right? So since you can read the champion models and know that both of them are heading in this direction, you can make the call that they're probably going to run away, and that if they run away, you won't be able to get anything done because you don't have a ward, you can't get the bush now. And it's not enough.
Okay.
So that's the conclusion I think you need to draw from these kinds of situations. It's like the choice to go is good. The choice to continue to go at this moment, once you've seen them start to back away and you don't have a ward, is wrong. If you have the ward, it's correct. Isn't that awful? The flow chart is so deep. You have to pay attention to so many things. But that's the game. And it's, like, really close, too. Like, boy.
I'll try to condemn the...
You know? Like, honestly, I think you can even say, like, this is not a decision you have to be... So that's the other thing, too, is, like, when you're evaluating your decisions, the result of the decision and the precision of the decision itself, or like how correct the decision was, often are not exactly the same. Like, your decision of when to move was almost correct, right? You were like a millisecond too late.
Yeah.
But the result flips on that millisecond, right? It's the difference between getting the wall stun and potentially getting the kill or not, right? And so, like, keep in mind that although the results switch on a dime, the quality of the decision does not. The quality of the decision is kind of continuous space, right?
Yeah.
So even though this feels really bad and is objectively a terrible result for you, you don't have to feel super bad about the decision, right?
Okay.
In a different world where you have 4 more MS, because they buff Vayne's MS, you make that play, you kill them, and it's fine.
Yeah.
Right? And especially at the level of play that you're at right now, I don't think you need to worry about optimizing things that are this close. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there's just an amount of, like, you know, focus on bigger issues going on.
I think that's the thing. It just felt so, like...
But yeah, it does feel bad. Yeah, this is a walk of shame, for sure. This is like, shit.
I think I had my support in one ear saying that I come back, and my jungler saying,
Please.
get in.
What? Yeah. So there, what happened here? Why does this feel the way that it does?
Can you wind it back?
Yeah. Let's watch it again. So what are the things we learned today?
I mean, we're just fighting for no reason, really.
For no reason? What's the reason?
Well, he has the... Well, the reason is that we want to deal damage. We want to get him out of lane, but he has the escape with his E.
Yeah. You're
And
still hitting him.
And
You hitting him and him blowing flash is good, isn't it?
Well, kind of. But I don't think he blows flashy. I think he just E's away, but we're walking directly
That's
at
the problem, though.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? Your Thresh thinks that you're going to chunk him out and blow his flash, but that's not true. That's not what the game is actually going to do if he does these inputs. He doesn't know what's going to happen when he presses that Q button. And that's the problem. Yeah?
Yeah.
This is what damage and movement foresight is about. This is your Thresh testing the limits of how aggressive he can go and finding out this is not a situation that he can make work. There's a way Ezreal can play it such that he doesn't take very much damage, and then he has defense advantage, and then he runs you guys down the lane, and you get kind of crapped on. Because you're on cooldown now. Isn't that funny? When you go aggressive, you tend to use cooldowns to try to do damage, and then you're on cooldown, and now you're on cooldown in enemy territory. Great place to get turned on, right? So, this is, like I say, this is an issue of damage and movement foresight, which is, like, that's what most players are talking about when they talk about experience, right? Because experience is the only place that you get this stuff. You need to know not in your head, but in your body. Yourself needs to know that when you take that lantern, it results in what happens 3 seconds from now. Because you don't have time to sit there and whip out your notepad and calculator and figure out what's going to happen, right? You have a quarter of a second to decide whether to click the lantern or not. And you are not making that decision. Yourself is.
Yeah.
And the only way that yourself gets better at decision making is with experience and practice. You have to do this enough times that your body remembers that that's what happens when you do this.
Okay.
That's why playing games is important. And doing stuff like this is important. So, even though in the context, in the scope of, am I going to win this game? This is a play that is horrible. We can zoom further out and say, in the scope of you getting better at a League of Legends player and understanding more what's going to happen when you do stuff in the game, which allows you to make more informed decisions and become a better player, this is an extremely important mistake to have made. Right?
Okay.
Every time you mess up, you are given a huge opportunity to learn something. Something very, very important, which allows you to make better decisions in the future, get more kills, die less, win more games, get challenger. It's that easy. Int enough games while paying attention, and you will become challenger.
Okay.
If you either int too few games or pay too little attention, you will not get challenger. But if you do both of those things, you will get challenger. It will.
Okay. Well.
That easy.
Yeah, there it is.
Because you look at Dopa, right? What's the difference between you and Dopa? Dopa tethers everybody to 10 units.
Yeah.
And escapes fights with 15 HP, He knows what will happen when he does things much, 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 much more precisely than you do. And the way that he got that information was by playing millions of games. And that's how it's done. You test hypotheses. You make hypotheses, you test them, and then you evaluate the results. You say, this is a good fight for me. You find out that if he misses the Q, it's actually pretty okay.
I checked the VOD, by the way. There's a kind of a wild all-in at 12:30.
Okay, shall we take a look at that?
Yeah, because if I remember rightly, the lane's kind of just more of just this.
Okay.
Somewhere around here. It's in the next minute, I think.
Yeah, just give us 12 minutes exactly to get a little context. See where we had been. Okay, jungler is mid, so we don't have to worry about that scope super much. We have wards that would see him if he were to head straight down, and we'd see that he's not, so we're pretty much safe. Aside from the fact that Galio is roaming down, which looks pretty sketchy. He might have ultimate. I don't like it that well. Ezreal with the perfect tethering to about 30 range. Not too bad. Yuumi shield, by the way. Dumb champion, by the way.
Can I walk you through my decision making here?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, so I saw Galio fake roamed and my mid called that he was missing.
Yep.
So I was like checking accurately for him. So I see him back mid under his turret. So I think Galio's like kind of out of the picture.
Yep.
So I call that we can try and make a play.
Okay.
Which I think is what leads to this all in.
Yeah. I mean, making a decision to all in is generally going to result in an all in.
Yeah, okay. That's not okay, you know what I mean.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't blame you. It's easy. Okay. So so you've checked. You think map scope is good? You think 2v2 scope is good? Yeah. I'm going to position in the most aggressive way that I can for all scopes. So let's make this happen. So to start out, what's wrong with this picture?
I'm completely open to get smacked by Israel.
I mean, you're close enough to a minion that you can hide behind it for Qs and stuff. I think there's a bigger problem.
We're gonna be fighting into their wave.
Yeah, I think that's the second biggest problem. What do you think is the first most important problem?
We don't know where the jungler is.
Third most important problem. What's the first most important problem? You actually do know where the enemy jungler is. You saw him mid about 20 seconds ago, and you had wards in mid and river that showed you that he left kind of upwards. He could be here, but it would be unusual.
Is it because Thresh is not in line with me?
Yes. It is the fact that Thresh is here, that his E range, his circle of gravity is here, right?
I'm going to be leaving it to fight.
Yeah. Your gravity is like here, right? Ezreal's gravity is something like, I don't know, something like this, right? Because he has to worry about minions. So his gravity is wonky shaped. So if you choose to move like this for an all-in, where can Thresh go? How can he help you? He can't.
Yeah.
Right? Because they move back, he moves up, same distance, right? He has no way to close the gap right now.
Mm-hmm.
So, when we talk about how do I know when I'm stronger and when I'm weaker, I'm going to tell you the number one thing in League of Legends that will tell you whether you are stronger or weaker is the number of people participating in the fight.
Yeah.
If you walk forward right now, even though Thresh is right behind you, you are actually engaging in a 1v2.
Yeah.
Because if he's out of range, he's out of range. There's it's that, like, decision versus reality, right? Like, the decision is the decision-making space is he's a couple of units too far back. He's not that far out of position in terms of literal units. But in terms of the result, he is out of range, period. It's a binary thing.
It's not like 90% out of range.
Yeah, it's not 90%. It's 100% a little bit out of range. But it's totally a little bit out of range. Okay. And so, that's what's going to happen, right? But because they walk into you for whatever reason, I don't understand that. He just waffles and puts himself in range. So that's great. Okay. Not bad. Okay. Okay. So, having watched that, let's go back and break it down further, because I can see it, so from here, right, there's like one thing that I look at on the screen that tells me that your decision was good and your execution was wrong. What's that?
My health and thresh yourself.
No.
The fact that oh, okay.
It is actually the fact that this ability is not on cooldown.
Yeah, I got flamed for that.
Yep, you deserve to get flamed for that.
Yeah.
It's not, and it's not wrong to get flamed for that, right? Like that's how you learn, that's how you grow. I mean, you know, not flamed, but like, you get what I mean, right? If you had pressed R, then that would have been a correct decision to take that fight. So
yeah,
the decision to fight was correct. The decision of how to fight, in which you chose, or more likely didn't choose, but just forgot to use R, ends up having it be bad, right?
Yeah.
So again, it seems kind of stupidly simple, but stupidly simple is actually exactly what we're aiming for when we're looking for things to improve, right? Here's your stupidly simple tip for how to make this fight happen better. Press R.
Okay.
Please remember, when all-inning, as Vayne, to press the R key.
Okay.
It causes you to do quite a significant amount more damage.
Yeah. I know.
And that's the problem. I know, but myself doesn't know. You have to teach yourself that fact, not you. You know it. Teach yourself to do it.
Okay.
And what that means is, play more Vayne, take more all-ins during the laning phase, and get flamed every time you don't press R. Flame yourself every time you don't press R. Gently.
No, the thresh was just like, in voice, just like bullying me off the way.
Good. As he should. He's doing his duty. He's making you a better player. So, as long as everybody's laughing, Flame is an excellent tool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, on a more serious note, right? If that's an issue, right? I mean, like, even just 10 minutes in practice tool with some target dummies, practicing the all-in combo on Vayne. Most people don't think of it as a combo, but it is. It's a sequence of buttons that you press in order to make things happen good. Like, you press R, then you click on them, then you click on them some more, then you press E, and then you press Q or something. I don't know. Some combination of things in that general vicinity, right? But like, R comes at the beginning. That's the important part of the combo, right?
Yeah.
So just getting used to deciding to go in and pressing R, right, is a skill. It's not a particularly complicated skill, but it is a skill, and you need to learn it, right? And it's different from other champions that have ults that aren't self-buffs, right? Like, most people, you choose to use your R at the end of the fight because it's an ability that does damage. Vayne is not like that. Vayne needs to make the decision early that this is an all-in, and commit to it by pressing the ability that has value over time, right? So, unironically, that's actually kind of a challenging thing to do, right? To know beforehand, like, whether this is going to be an all-in or just a short trade is not an easy thing, right? So, although pressing R is easy, deciding to press R is not easy.
Yeah. Sorry, I was talking over you. I started playing Sivir as well, which feels kind of similar.
Yeah,
kind of
exactly. Yeah, no, Sivir doesn't even do freaking damage. It's just about, do I want to fight? If I want to fight, then press R. If it lets me fight, I guess. Or if it lets somebody else get in, it's so complicated. You know what I mean? Like, on the one hand, it's simple, and on the other hand, as soon as you actually look at it with any kind of, like, critical thinking and think about all the information that needs to be in your head to actually make the decision, it's actually very complicated. So, don't be afraid to give yourself a break, right? This thing that you are attempting to do, to press a single button at the beginning of a team fight, is difficult because at the beginning of a team fight is an extremely complicated idea.
Yeah.
You know, you hand a VOD of League of Legends to your dad and say, like, you know, locate me the start of the team fight without, you know, rewinding, like, pause when the start of the team fight's gonna happen. You can't do it. No way. Right? That's a skill that needs to be learned. So,
Okay.
acknowledge the difficulty that is there and work on it. You'll get there. It's just a matter of time. Time and practice. Yeah. But other than that, I actually thought you played it like pretty much fine, right? I mean, like if we go back and like watch this in slow motion and like critique your positioning here, right? Like so playback speed 0.25, right? So Thresh is too far away and you're walking a little bit too far forward, and it's tough to click on him in the minions, but you do a decent job, actually, and you do manage to hit him, which is pretty impressive considering the amount of ways in which you can misclick here. Your kiting is pretty good.
I think I just toggled the champions only thing.
Yeah, so you actually use target champions only. That's not something everybody does. Nice job. So you're moving in. Thresh is actually able to hook them out from behind you so that you can dodge the Yuumi stuff. You move out of the way so that even if they flash backwards, you still don't get hit by Yuumi. You do a good job continuing to kite and get autos off. The only reason that he lives is because Galio ults and he gets healed and Yuumi heal happens at the same time. Like, you know, I don't think that there's that much different that you can do with positioning without using flash or R, right?
Okay.
So now the question becomes, what is the moment that you should have pressed R and how should you have known, right? What is the information that you actually need to press R?
Are we like committing to this?
Oh yeah. So when are you committed?
Press play and
press play and you press pause when you're committed. Find me the moment.
What?
I mean, you have access to the VOD, right? If you go to it on cue, then you can actually pause and play at the same time as I am.
All right.
We'll be live synced.
I didn't know this stuff works. Okay.
Yeah. That's the advantage of this software.
All right. Okay.
It's
I was just watching
stuff.
your Discord stream.
You should be able to click your own link, the one that you sent me.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. While you're doing that and getting that set up, I'm going to use the restroom real quick. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Okay, I'm back.
Oh man, it's kind of broken.
Oh.
It's because it loaded it in Edge rather than Chrome. Okay. Yeah.
I see. So while I was in the bathroom, I actually had a kind of a brain blast, which is a thing about memory that I think is kind of important to know, which is the idea of, especially when we're talking about like remembering to do things, right? And this again applies to life as well as League, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is not usually an issue of recall. It is an issue of original awareness. Do you kind of get what I'm saying by that?
Yeah, so like I know that I should do it in an all-in. It's just I didn't realize that this was an all-in.
Yeah, you didn't
But
realize
it's like,
this was an all-in. You never found the place that gave you the original awareness that this was a situation that would require you to do it. Exactly.
yeah,
And so when you're forgetting to do something, that's usually what you have to fix. Is you have to fix the moment that you should have originally been aware of the thing.
yeah.
Right?
Okay.
So, you know, we went through that kind of fast. I like kind of zoomed right to that as like the kind of critical factor, but like that's a general pattern that you can apply on your own when you're watching your own VODs and having issues with stuff, especially with memory. Is figure out what's the moment that you should have actually gotten the information and been aware of it that tells you what you forgot to do, what you forgot to do.
Okay. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. So,
okay.
have you got control? Can you press play?
I'll just press play, see if it works.
There you go.
Okay.
Looks like it is.
Yeah. Okay. So
just pause as soon as you think it's clear that you're committed and that this is an all-in. Really, here.
only because I know, like, kind of. Okay, I guess if I'm looking just at the game, then yeah, I guess it's probably more like maybe like this.
I still think this can be him flashing or Eing backwards, right?
Okay.
I think I think this still could be a trade. I think he could still go back. I think now it's pretty clear.
Yeah, I think maybe I'm struggling because I remember like shouting at my thresh like, "We go, like.
Yeah.
So maybe it's messing with.
Yeah. So you wanted to commit, but it didn't feel like he was committing.
Yeah.
That was partially because when you happened to go forward, he was too far back, right? And so it took him a while to catch up. And that was part of the problem there. So maybe the real thing that you needed to be aware of was his actual positioning.
Yeah.
And if you were aware of that, then you wouldn't have been caught off guard with why he was so slow to actually follow you into the all-in, and then you would have pressed your R on time.
Yeah.
So it can be tricky, right? I bet you wouldn't have thought that keeping track of your support's position was why you forgot to press R.
Yeah, I feel like maybe there's a different point when I'm committed to when the both of us are.
Yeah. So when you decide, is not the same as when the fight is committed.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? Now that's another really important idea, right? When you decide to try for an all-in is that's a two-part dance. They have to handshake it as well. They have to not run away. They have to fight you. You can decide to walk up. That's something you have control over. You don't decide to all-in. Okay. You can decide to all-in in response to them not walking away.
Okay.
But if they choose to walk away, it is what it is, right? So it's when they don't walk away, that is the moment where, and now, if they do try to walk away, you are in range to follow them regardless of that fact. This is the moment that you have to commit. This is the moment your R should have been pressed.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, sick. But still, just take a moment to appreciate your cursor control. Here. Watch your cursor and what it does. It's actually quite clean.
Do you think it's better than it was?
Miles better. Oh yeah. No question it's better.
Okay. Okay. I've not really felt the difference in that regard, maybe, but...
Yeah. I encourage you, if you have any, go back and watch an old VOD of yours and watch it in slow motion like this, and just watch your cursor and watch how quickly it moves and how precisely it moves.
Okay.
And how many clicks you're doing, right? And I think you should be able to see a pretty distinct difference. Like I say, to me, it happened gradually to you, which is why it's difficult for you to see it. But for me, I went from watching, like, a 2-month-old VOD of yours to watching this VOD, right? And so all of the little things in between I didn't see, and it looks like a huge difference to me.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yikes!
Yeah.
How many times does 20 range decide the outcome of a fight?
More than you'd think, I guess.
A lot.
Yeah.
And that's because people, despite what 99% of the community will say, everybody that plays this game is actually pretty damn good at it. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
It's a hard game, yeah.
it's a really hard game. There's not really anything that comes close, I don't think. Like, you know.
Yeah, like I put someone that doesn't really play games into like a bot lobby because she
Yeah.
wanted to learn, and she just fed her brains out.
Yeah.
There's like no hope at all.
Yeah, right? It's like, good God. Like, it's amazing. Like, even to just control the character at all would be like the whole game in many games.
Yeah, and like they were looking like what's all these like
What do these
bars and
buttons
like
do? Yeah, and then there's like 8 billion items you can buy, and some of them are wrong? Are you
yeah.
kidding me? Like, what does that mean? Right? Like, it's so doomed. Right? So.
Should I speed this up by the way?
Sure. I mean, at this point, slow motion recalling isn't generally the most riveting of gameplay. But, yeah. Okay. So, to recap, right? What are the things that we talked about so far? Just to solidify it. In this video, what did we talk about?
So defender's advantage at the start when we kind of over committed onto the Israel.
So what is defender's advantage?
It's the idea that if someone's like kind of checking into you or they're being forced to chase you, that you've got sort of an inherent advantage of that.
Mm-hmm. And what is that advantage? Where does it come from?
Depends on the scenario. In lane, like
in that scenario that we looked at, where was the advantage coming from?
Oh, so I'm moving into his skill shot, so it's hard for me to dodge, and he's running away.
Mm-hmm. And how about the thresh at level 1, I think, or 2? When he walked up to hit the Ezreal, who had the defender's advantage, and what form did it take?
They did, because we were fighting into their wave, so he was taking minion damage.
Exactly so. Okay. And then after that, we talked about what?
Like awareness and recognizing play, and when to call off a play.
Yeah. And what were the takeaways of that?
That, like, just because the result of a play is bad doesn't mean that the original decision is necessarily bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there can be a big difference between whether it goes well or poorly and the exact timing of the decision, right? So decisions are time sensitive, I think, is a really important thing, right? Sometimes whether a decision is correct or incorrect is when you make it in milliseconds, right? And if you can make it faster, it's generally more correct, right? And it gets less and less and less and less correct the longer it takes you to make it, right? Mm-hmm. Which is why experience is so unbelievably important in League of Legends. Because we can sit here and analyze in slow motion all day, but that doesn't help yourself get any better. It helps you get better, but it doesn't help yourself get better. Because yourself is the one that actually deals with the real-time stuff. And the only way that yourself learns is by doing.
Okay.
Generally, the loop should be make a prediction about what's going to happen, try and do it, and if the result is different than what you predicted, figure out why. Figure out what piece of information you missed, and then prepare yourself to pay attention to that factor next time, and then try again. That's how you train yourself.
Okay.
And then we just talked about. So
yeah. I can scan through my
Sure.
board and try and find
Yeah, why not?
another team fight. Oh yeah, there's another crazy 3v3 bot coming up
Sure.
actually.
I like crazy 3v3s. I actually hate
It's kind
crazy
of
3v3s. They're
okay.
so
This is like
touchy.
kind of a long one actually.
Nice.
It's actually coming up right now.
Lovely.
So this is like, you know, those fights that just kind of like drag on like forever.
Happen, yeah. Sort of for no reason, over nothing. Just 'cause
Yeah,
they
like
can.
someone gets caught and then their
Yep.
team come and then my team come
Yep.
and then we fight and no one dies.
Speaking of gravity wells.
Yeah, literally. Yeah.
Team fight is black hole.
It's like watching LPL, like one person oversteps 5 TPs.
So
Don't
true.
watch it.
One person, 2 units too far forward. Immediately doomed. Okay, so you pressed R this time. That's good.
I'm getting stuck on the pillar.
Oh, Pepe hands. Okay. Okay. Ooga.
No, it's not over, though.
Oh my god, it's not over. What? What?
If I'm thinking of the same one, it's still not over.
Isn't League of Legends great? Oh my god. You actually almost played that so good. Let me take that back. You did play that so good. It almost worked.
I think if I'd went back towards my turret rather than into the bush, I might have
At what
lived.
point? Go back
Um,
and find the point.
I mean, I took like a ton of damage, obviously, like throughout the whole thing, but it was like this point when I start going for the Aatrox and I just follow him into the bush. I think if I had to start running back rather than just kind of hiding, I'll maybe make it.
So where exactly? Okay, so go back, play it in 0.25, and show me where you should have clicked.
I feel like there's probably bigger problems than this.
You think? Like what?
I feel like I took. Although no, actually, because I'm kind of full health. No, never mind. Yeah, no, okay, never mind.
Yeah, right. Like
My brain's fried just watching it. I thought I got more low from the team fight.
yeah, no, you actually positioned beautifully in the team fight. It's important to reality check yourself there. That 248 feels kind of bad.
Yeah, apart from right then.
That auto feels kind of bad. This auto feels kind of bad.
No, I should have kept running and let the thresh come.
Can he ever close the gap? Honestly, I think that's your real issue. It's right there, right? So I think the rule that you didn't abide by here is you didn't use your defender's advantage well enough in terms of skill shots. So Ezreal can't Q you through this cannon minion, and right in this frame, it's directly in between you and him. If you just pivot around this point and just do whatever the opposite of his movement is relative to that, he can't hit you with Q, and you actually have like good lifesteal plus Thresh with W headed your way. I actually think you can kill him. I thought he was dead here, straight up. He has Conqueror, which I'm not used to because I haven't played the game in a while, but like, it's gonna be close. It's gonna be close for sure. But
I at least live. I think if I do that.
you definitely you live if you're able to take the lantern out. So again, what do you think is the highest level? So you know, we talked about this, right? But what's an even more general rule that we already talked about that was really important that should be followed here?
I'm drawing a blank. Oh, yeah, okay. Which should be somewhat parallel with Thresh. Oh, near him,
If
at
you
least.
can, try to stay in range of your teammates.
Yeah.
Right? If you make the judgment call that if you continue to run this way, you will die, because eventually you will simply run into turret. Or you'll have to, at some point, turn and fight Ezreal and die. Right?
Yeah.
Either there's no way in which you live, in which case it doesn't matter what you do, generally. You should just do the most damage you can to Ezreal. Or the only way you might live is if you get lanterned out. And the only way you can get lanterned out is if you're close enough. So, how do you stay in range of Thresh and do good damage to Ezreal and stay close enough to Thresh that there's, like, a chance you can get lanterned? It's exactly what we were talking about. It's pivoting around this minion to stay as defensive as you possibly can. Let Ezreal move into you and try to keep the minion in between him and you, such that he can't Q you for a longer period of time, right? If in this situation he walks down and you instead walk up like this,
Walk up, yeah.
right? Then he autos you, but you're able to auto him, and now you're like here, right? And then from this position you can walk a little bit further like this, right? And now you're here, Thresh ignites, just like in the same. And then at this moment, when you can be here, right? And when Ezreal Qs, it goes straight into the minion instead of straight into your health bar.
Yeah.
So the critical factor you didn't think about was Ezreal Q not being able to go through minions and using minions as terrain when fighting Ezreal.
You know what my thought process was? I've just kind of remembered what I was.
Sure.
What
was your thought process?
I was thinking if I move into the bush, he can't auto me.
That's not a bad. Yeah. So, again, right? That's a totally reasonable thought to have. You know what I mean? The only, and against most champions, that is the point.
Yeah.
It is only because you are fighting an Ezreal who has a skill shot that can be fired at anybody and which passes through minions that this becomes better than this. This is the general case. This is the weird exception of this particular fight against Ezreal with a Thresh.
Okay.
Right? So, like, again, don't be too hard on yourself, because the sorts of things that you need to do are edge case things. They're things that are different because of some weird scenario that you find yourself in. They're not general case things. The general case is correct to do this.
The game's just so hard.
The game is really hard, dude.
It's like infinite, like, skill cap.
Yeah, literally. I'm glad that you are starting to see the astronomical scale of this game, because it's huge. It's absolutely enormous. And when you watch pros and how, like,
effortless they make it.
Effortlessly and precisely they navigate it. It's just incredible. It's actually, it's unironically peak performance.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay.
Probably Teddy walks up like this and kills the guy, and then is 4-0 instead of 3-1, and then carries the game. Right? You know? And it's like little tiny decisions, like a difference of 400 units in one moment. Difference between pro player and average player. Decision making, tiny difference. Result, huge, astronomical difference. Killed or not killed.
Okay.
And the game is full of that. That's everywhere. So, moral of the story, you're almost a pro, except that instead you die.
Okay.
God, his autos do so much damage with Conqueror. But look how much damage he's taking. Like, this defender's advantage is so big, right? And if you look at that, if you hadn't taken the Q, you would have been alive long enough to take one more auto and still get hit by the W, and you definitely kill him, right?
Yeah.
No way you die.
By the way, there's Rise TP.
Rise TP. Fight's not over, by the way. GP in top lane, by the way. It's like, Jesus Christ. These teammates, I can't win. Hard stuff. Join the fight, dumbass.
No, you press start, to be fair. That's, about what we can expect from GP.
Anyway. So, summarize. What's the takeaway from this?
From this clip?
Yeah, from this clip.
Just, I guess tiny decisions like do I walk down or up can completely
Literally,
flip.
they'd be the difference between dying and not dying.
Yeah.
And
I guess it's almost like a mental APM kind of thing.
Interesting connection. Explain it.
So if I'm breaking down what you can do in each, like, not frame, but like, yeah, frame, then I can make better decisions.
Absolutely.
Of what I can do.
The faster you collect information, because your mental APM is higher, because you're seeing things faster and slowing down the game for yourself, that information that you collect allows you to make different positioning decisions, which allow you to prevent damage done to yourself, which allow you to win more fights. Absolutely.
Okay.
So you can see, too, how mental APM plays into all of this. If you don't have the mental APM to even process the information that's coming at you, you can't make the decisions that you need to position correctly. It's just you don't have the processing power. It's like trying to do AI on a TI-84. Like, it's not going to happen. You know? Like, gotta upgrade that memory. And the way that you do that is by tensing the mental muscle, doing the mental APMs. That's exactly it. It's a small thing, but it's the basis of all of it, right?
Yeah.
Learning how to think faster and click more precisely. As I've said before, that's literally the whole game. Not just some part of it. Like, that's the game. The game is looking at the screen and then clicking and pressing some buttons. And your ability to do that is what separates you from pro players.
Yeah.
Just click better for it. Click more up next time.
There it is. I'm trying to just find one more because my brain's kind of melted, honestly.
Sure.
But if we could do one more clip, then
yeah, I'm down to do one more clip if you're not afraid of the overheating, the melt, the brain boom.
I'm just trying to look for one where it's not just like, because I think we did end up winning this game, but it got kind of crazy at the end. Like,
yeah,
it was just. I don't think it was because we played well. I think it was just one of those like, it's a clown fiesta.
I don't think there's been a well-played game of League of Legends yet.
Oh. Yeah, maybe.
In the whole of history.
It's like, was it Monte Cristo was like the perfect game as like 0 kills.
Yeah.
And you just take the towers in like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
I think that's Monte Cristo.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, like, you know. It would make sense that was the case, but I don't know. I mean, I'm not 100% certain about that it's 0 kills, but definitely it's like stupidly precise. That much is clear.
Okay, I think 33 minutes.
Sure.
It was. Actually, yeah, this game was a disaster.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we won, but like there was a Baron fight where I just kind of rolled in and ulted it once and it died.
Mm-hmm.
It was hell. I don't think this is.
Yep.
I don't think this is that fight, but.
Okay. So here we are.
Yeah, I think this is a dragon fight.
Let's skip forward, see what happens. Right. Skip the fight. Oh boy, there was some face checking that happened there, but that's okay. Okay, TP happens. We're dancing. So there's some people showing up. We'll watch this from here to get context on where everybody is, but
yeah,
I'll one exit until we actually start the fight. Okay. By the way, if you don't already, watching things in 0.25 speed, A+ way to learn about stuff.
Okay.
It just makes it so much easier to perceive what's going on, right? It lowers the difficulty of the game. So, like, what's going on here?
Can I just point out, by the way, these are fights that, like, I feel like I only did well in them because I'm ahead, not because I actually did anything correctly. If you know what I mean. Like, I think I do okay in this fight. Like, I
keep
clean
in
up
mind that what is correct changes based on how strong you are.
Okay. Okay.
Right? How strong you are is what determines what the correct positioning is.
Right, okay.
That said, I totally get what you mean. It's like, you know, there are ways where you dodge everything that you can dodge and are in range, you know, taking no damage for as long as you can be, right? So, like we can
I feel like
evaluate fights by that metric.
Yeah, like I felt like I was just kind of strong enough that I could just start smacking people and it would kind of work itself out.
Yeah. But keep in mind, this is where we want to be. We want to be playing our early games so well that we don't have to play our late games well. Right? That's the ideal, right?
Yeah.
That's the easiest way to win League of Legends. It's only when we aren't that fed that we have to care about how you position when you're even in team fighting.
Yeah.
Right? So think of team fighting from far ahead, team fighting from even, and team fighting from behind as different skills. And judge yourself differently on all of them, right?
Okay.
Because it's not fair to compare a team fight where you're down 10 items to a team fight where you're 7, 4, and 7. Literally a giant plane full of passengers and all of that gravity slamming directly onto this Galio's face with a billion silver bolts. Like, you know.
Okay, yeah, so, that makes sense.
Taking into account the fact that you're Giga fed, how do you play this fight? Are you playing it correctly?
I feel like there was more. I feel like I could have probably taken the opportunity to hit the back line with my ult.
Yeah, I think you went too far away here. Right? I think the last second, you cared a little too much about what was going on in front of you. And you were running away from ranges that didn't matter.
Yeah.
Right? The gravity's weaker than your body is telling you it is here.
Yeah.
So what were you scared of?
I think this is another thing where the comms kind of messed it up because the Rise got chunked out and he was just yelling like,
"It's fun."
Oh crap, basically.
Yeah.
So I was just like, oh god, right, okay.
Okay. So.
But then it took me a second to kind of assess where I was.
Mm-hmm. So what that says to me is you need to learn to
trust what I'm seeing rather than what people are telling me.
Yeah, it's basically, it's like comms are information, they're not truth.
Yeah.
Right? All that a comm is what someone else thinks they're seeing.
Yeah.
No more, no less. And that's valuable, but it's not the end. It's not the truth. What you see is the truth.
Okay. No, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think you could have hit Ezreal there. If you had known that Galio W was on cooldown, you didn't need to be that scared of him running into you there, right? Like, you have plenty of health, you have Bork, you have the QSS active, right? Like, you can afford to take some damage and double kill them both there by playing more aggressively. You can ignore the gravity that they have because the fact that they're on cooldown made them weaker. But because you were paying too much attention to comms and not enough to what was going on the screen, you didn't know that. So, slight misposition there to not quite get out of range, but you know, that was a problem of multiple scopes, right?
Yeah.
That was a problem of you needed to go away from Aatrox and outside of the E range, right?
Yeah.
And you chose favoring away from Aatrox more than outside of the E range, which maybe was the wrong call.
Okay.
Right? Hard to say.
I get the feel from watching like this. just need to play a bit more on the edge rather than like. Well, like when I'm strong, I can kind of afford
Yeah.
to be a bit more.
Yeah. You can.
Yeah. Which
And
again, that's something else that I know.
that's the
If
tough
you ask
thing,
me that, then,
right? Because and now here's the thing, right? When you watch it at 0.25 speed, you get that sense. When you watch it at this speed, right? Let's go back and watch it at 1x. Do you get that same sense? Because this is what you actually see. It looks like it's actually happening comically fast, does it not?
is that not sped up?
It's not. That's 1x. That's real game speed. Isn't that insane?
That's crazy.
You play this game at this speed and you make decisions this well. Okay? It's not bad.
God. Okay.
You're insane. I'm pogging out of my gourd, dude. to use a northern lionism. But seriously, like, you know, so you need to figure out what's the difference between what you see when you watch it at 1x and when you watch it at 0.25. What are you seeing at 0.25 that you're missing at 1?
Okay.
It's not a theoretical question. What are you missing?
Oh. Galio cooldown in that one example.
Uh-huh. So how do you... when and how should you know that Galio W is on cooldown? It's not a trick question.
If I see him use it.
How do you see him use it?
By looking at the screen.
Yeah. Looking at what part of the screen?
Galio.
If you're looking at Galio, what are you missing?
Everything else.
So when do you look at Galio?
I don't know.
Right? This is the problem.
Okay.
So you need... So this is where a skill called visual scanning comes into play, right?
Yeah.
You don't have infinite time to watch the whole screen. You have to prioritize. You only get to collect certain information. And you have to know when to prioritize what. I want you to watch this clip at 0.25 speed, and I want you to like draw where your eyes should be this whole time.
Okay.
Kind of crazy idea, right? So yeah, give it your best shot, right?
I think I get it.
So just, you know, start drawing. What should you be looking at? Yep. Keep drawing. Right?
Still kind of this area.
Yep. Still that area. Right.
And then what my team are doing.
Yep. Uh-huh.
And then I look at the
this
mini-map.
feels kind of bad, doesn't it? That moment there. So now we start getting into things like camera control, right? There was a moment where your camera was like, the top of it was like here. Right?
Yeah.
So that feels bad, right?
Yeah.
You just missed like a good 1/10 of a second of important information.
Yeah.
Right? This stuff starts to matter in team fights, where it usually doesn't in lane. Right?
Okay.
So, practicing actively moving your camera to different positions can be worthwhile. You know?
Okay.
Because, you know, whether you get it right the first flick or after 2 adjustments matters in a team fight.
Big deal. Yeah.
You know? You cannot collect information that you cannot see. So watch for that in 0.25 speed. Watch for the moments where your camera gets screwed and you can't see what you need to see.
Do you want me to keep drawing, by the way?
Yeah, keep drawing. Where are you looking?
Okay, I'm just staring at this guy now.
I think
And then I know.
you should be looking at this. I think that's the most important thing there, right? So that's where we disagree, right? So once we get there, right? So he W's, but now my eyes go here. They say, where are the edges of the Yumi prison, and how can I escape them? Right? So my eyes are like here and like here-ish. Like I'm like darting to the place that I'm thinking about moving to and asking, you know, is there anything going on up here? I'm asking in my periphery, like, what do I see? Do I see any movement up there? Right?
Yeah.
Is it safe to move in the direction that I think it is? My eyes are not here. I don't see Galio use W.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So the question is, can you actually train yourself to both see this, click, check this, commit to moving here, and then flick your eyes back and notice that he used W?
Yeah, that's pretty rough.
It is pretty rough. So there's no, it's no question why you missed it. It's hard to see. You've got other things to pay attention to.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's a really important thing of reviewing in 0.25 is consider the constraints of real time, right? And kind of try and figure out, like, what is your actual mental APM when you're watching it, right? If you come up with a solution, go back, and it's kind of hard to do this, but like try to like watch the team fight like fresh as though you're playing it and see if that solution that you came up with is like reasonable to do or not, right?
Yeah.
Like if you actually try to look in the ways that you looked and see the things that you tried and think you ought to have looked at, what feels dangerous suddenly that didn't before? How does your decision making change, right? Like you can kind of simulate playing the team fight again by just watching.
I forgot to say as well, the Galio's on like 4 items, some kind of...
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, his gravity is huge, right? He's level 16 and he's terrifying.
So I think that's why my brain was kind of hardwired on him.
Yeah, so you're hardwired on him and you're like, get me out, right? And so, when not to put too fine a point on it, Galio bad. Me go away Galio. Yes, good plan. A+, right? So like, not incorrect, but so you know that he's stronger, but the problem is you need to know how much stronger he is.
Okay.
And you need to know that if all he can do is, because he actually can't E you from that position. If he backs up, he actually hits the people that are, that he's currently taunting. If you notice that his W is down, if you know that he can't E you, then all he can do is Q and auto, and that's going to take you to what, like
2/3.
2/3 route, and you have life steal, you have this shield, right? You have heal up, you have flash up, you have R up, you have tumble up.
Yeah.
Right? So like, it's not a problem, right? But that's like 7 things.
Yeah.
You can't look at all of that in one moment. So really, in the like 10 seconds previous to this, when you're dancing around the dragon,
I should be kind of telling myself what I've got to use.
Yep. These are what you need to familiarize yourself with, so that can become background information that you already have.
Mm-hmm.
Because if your flash is down, you have no heal, and you're on, and you have like an offensive item instead of the thing. Maybe taking 2/3 of your health is like you can no longer join the fight in the like 10 seconds that come after getting chunked out by Galio at the beginning here, and it becomes the wrong decision, right? Like everything is so knife's edge here. So like, yeah, be conscious of all of that information, and also when you need to collect it. And the information about how strong everybody is, and also your current tools that you have to work with. That's what you need to review in the couple seconds right before the fight starts.
Okay.
So I would say, if you want to improve your team fighting, amusingly enough, probably the simplest, best steps that you can take right now to do that are press tab more often and look at your skill bar more often.
Mm-hmm.
You do those 2 things, you'll have a better understanding of who's fed and who's not, and like how scary everything is. And then that information will get fed to yourself, so that when he actually plays the team fights, he makes better decisions.
Okay.
Just gain original awareness of the information. Don't worry about remembering it. Just know it in the first place.
Okay.
The rest will follow.
Okay.
So, pretty abstract session today, but I tried to make it as concrete as we could in the places that we could make it concrete.
No, I think most of it's kind of went in.
Okay. So, more concretely, what specifically are you going to try to do in the coming weeks?
Can I just have a second to think? I'm kind of
Absolutely.
overloading.
Process, my dude. Take a moment.
I mean, awareness seems to be a lot of the problem.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest theme for sure.
Yeah.
That's I think the biggest takeaway that you can make is that if you want to improve your team fighting, the number one thing you need to work on is your awareness. If you become aware of the information that currently you are missing, that is what will allow you to make the decisions that currently you're unable to make. The problem is not your formula, the problem is the variables going into the formula. Too many of them are zeros. Fill them in.
Yeah. Okay.
And, as always, that opens up a whole bucket of other questions. But the good news is, you got resources! Google is your friend. Yeah. And Royal Library is your friend. And I'm your friend. So, do your best. Do some research. Think about it. Come up with some stuff. And the next time that we meet, we'll have a follow-up, and we'll talk through what you figured out, and work through what new questions you come up with.
Okay.
Sound like a plan?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, well, solid work today.
All right.
And pleasure as always.
Great, thank you.
I guess I'll see you again in 2 weeks, huh?
Is it okay if I kind of let you know
Sure.